pray, dear Lord, that you protect them coming in and going out. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Today I would like to talk to you about Nehemiah, and I'm particularly interested in the 5th chapter of Nehemiah. And the subject of my message will be the glory of God. Amen. The glory of God. Nehemiah can teach a lot to Westside 55. Nehemiah dealt with the disposition and inequality of the rich and the poor. Nehemiah sought to equalize the situation, and his efforts came to victory, not only producing the rebuilding of the wall, but also come to unifying the people, both the rich and the poor. And Nehemiah, the outcry of the poor reached Nehemiah's ears as he was governor of Judah, and he had to set policy and correct the injustice. There was a gap between the rich and the poor, and it always existed, even in Jerusalem before the exile. However, it seems like it got worse once the exile came. Now, the people who were remaining in Jerusalem, similar to the people who have been remaining in the west side, they were poor. The people who came in back from exile, they were well off because they were able to earn money and prosper. However, they did not lift up those who were the residents of the community. In fact, they not only didn't lift them up, they used them to expand and increase their wealth. What we find is that Nehemiah can teach us a lot about the inequality of those who are coming in and those who are already there. Now, one thing I admire about the Westside Future Fund is the idea that they have a tax fund to help individuals deal with the increase in property values, especially the poor residents who've always been there. Because as many of you know or will know, the ground itself has become more valuable, and taxes will drive away and make poor people even poorer. And this gap between the rich and the poor is very unfavorable to the poor, to the residents who are already there. In Nehemiah's case, most of the people were called upon to borrow money from the folks who had money. They not only had to borrow the money, they had to pay interest on the money. And it got so bad, they had famine in the land, and so they could not pay the money back, so they had to put their children into slavery. They first put their sons into slavery, and then ended up putting their daughters into slavery. So Nehemiah decided that he would speak up, and convince them to do what was right. Now, I want you to understand something, that all of us has a position to play in the West Side. And all of us, our mission should be defending the poor. God cares about the poor and the oppressed. And one of the most prominent things in the Bible is our response towards the poor. The outcome of the poor, the outcry of the poor reached Nehemiah's ears, and as governor of Judah, he set policy to correct this injustice. This was so hard and for the poor, and there was insufficiency all over. You hear a lot of times about food insufficiency, you hear about housing insufficiency. Well, the poor in Jerusalem had all of those, plus they were at a disadvantage because they were unable to pay the taxes. Unable to pay the taxes, so they lost their land. So what I want you to understand is 3 points. For the glory of God, we're called upon to defend the poor. For the glory of God, we're called upon to defend the poor. We need to cry out against the injustice of the poor. We need to cry out about the inequality. We need to cry out about the usury that goes on. And because God cares for the poor and oppressed, and he wants us to be his hands. God has no hands unless he has our hand. He has no mouth unless he has our mouth. He has no feet unless he has our feet. So God wants us to cry out and speak up about the inequality of the poor. So what are you doing right now? Are you crying out about the inequality of the poor? And shouldn't you understand something? That if you don't speak, nobody speaks. I remember the Holocaust where the poem says they came for the butchers and I was not a butcher and I didn't care. And eventually they came for me. So I ask you all to speak up, defend the poor. Now, second point I want to make is the use of power. The glory of God depends upon the proper use of power. Now what we have is you have the rich and the poor. And sometimes the rich make the golden rule, but the poor has to disobey. So it's up to us to speak up against the power, and it's up to us to have them use their power in the right way. The third thing I want you to understand is about the glory of God is to get angry when you see abuse. Get angry when you see abuse. That's what Nehemiah did. Look at verse 6. I'm very angry when I heard the outcry and these words. Nehemiah was not just very angry, but he was very angry. We should get very angry at the inequality that exists. And we should lift up and speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Nehemiah brought charges against the nobles, and they were publicly held to public accountability. And eventually, they decided that they would do what God wanted them to do. The glory of God, that's what we're all about. That's what we're called to do. We're not called to just look at things and pass it by because it's not us. We're called about to speak for the poor who cannot speak for themselves. We're called to use our authority to serve the needs of others above ourselves. God sees our faithfulness or faithlessness. God sees it all the time. And if we want to obtain the glory of God, then we need to be about God's business. Be about God's business to help the poor in all situations. I challenge you today, speak up. Speak up, speak up, speak up.
All right, speak up. So let's thank him and give him another round. I know personally I appreciate your message. One, I appreciate your authenticity of your message because you do speak up. And so thank you, because a lot of our Transform West Side Summits, you often ask some of the more questions of the issues that you raised about justice and inequality. So thank you for always speaking up. And I think also reminding us, a lot of the work of the West Side Future Fund is we're out raising charitable funds, because there's so much revitalization activity coming into the neighborhoods. As you noted, the injustices, those that have been in the neighborhood for so long suffering, at just the time things are getting better. So how do we ensure those, speaking to the poor can, be on that rising tide. So there's a lot more to be done. So thank you all for being here this morning to be a part of it. And thank you again for your message and for speaking up. And we're now going to give all of y'all a chance to briefly speak up when we do our self-introductions. So I'm going to start over here in the self-introductions. For those that are here for the first time, we ask you to say, introduce yourself with your name and then your affiliation. I work for or from this neighborhood. And then we ask you just to do a full stop after that. Because we're trying to move around the whole room. And if you have more information you want to get about your organization, or you have an event you want folks to know about, we can certainly put that up on our social media or in our bulletin. But as we're going around, we'd like to do these self-introductions to help encourage networking. So, if you're hearing someone you think you could, help, kind of back to the message, with their mission, encourage you to make that introduction, or if you have something you think someone could help you. And the big why for those who come to summits regularly, we redesigned the summits to a different time, was to encourage more in-person attendance, because we see a huge benefit of the summits was the networking that happened. And that networking is obviously just not the same on Zoom. So the reason we moved it back to 7:45, and the reason we're now doing once a month, was really with the goal of driving attendance back up. So we're glad to see more people here this morning, and I'm going to start here. We're going to just go down row to row. If you're ready, we'll just say your name and your affiliation, and then I'll kind of continue on. All right?
My name is Junior. Check one. My name is Junior K. Smith Jr. I'm from Decatur, Georgia, and I rep.
Watching the clock, I would usually go fun, and the folks that are bringing us our production this morning, Icon and TV were introduced. So sorry, but we want to make sure we got enough time for the panelists. But did anyone hear a name or someone self-introduced? Like, hey, I would love to meet that person, or maybe I can raise your hand, because that's really would encourage you to do that. Because the great thing about the summit is hearing those stories of connection that happen, and something great comes out of it. So thank you for taking the time to do that, and hopefully we'll have some fun. So Maria Saporta is coaching me on. We have one final. She controls the power of the pen, so we're not going to deny the suggestion from Maria Saporta. But you're our last self-introduction. Yeah, thank you. I know a lot of pressure with this one.
Hello, good morning. My name is Myrna Clayton. Excuse my voice. The weather is having an impact. I'm with Showability, West Side. Atlanta Public Schools, and from Collier Heights area. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and now Benjamin, now you do a social media check-in for us.
Yeah, so again, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in right now. Just a few Friday morning greetings for you. Miss Liz Carter, thank you for tuning in. Cedric Sims, Sagan Wright, everybody else tuned in on YouTube, we appreciate you. Wendell Charles, Love, and Marion Dabney, Patricia Lee, Mother Moore. Mother Moore, I miss you. We need to do something. Rosario Hernandez, Historic Westside Gardens, thank you for tuning in and all the great work y'all do. Latarsha Holden, Gigi Sands, Diana Palmer Price, Patricia Lee, if I didn't say you already. Myra Surratt Walters, Kim Estes, and Corey Thomas, We appreciate everybody tuning in again. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, follow our channels, all of that good stuff. Help us to spread the word about what goes on at these amazing summits. Like I said earlier, it's a great opportunity. As John just showed us, a great opportunity to network for both residents, stakeholders, business owners, and everything in between. So again, use this as an opportunity to help us all come together as one community to uplift one another. John.
All right, so now we're ready to get on with our main panelist discussion today. So what we're going to do, I'm going to call your names up, and as I call y'all's names, please come on to the stage, and you can see we're ready to have you seated. So I first want to welcome up Ms. Annette Abernathy. Annette, I'm sorry, I pronounced it wrong. The President and CEO of the Ralph David Apney III Foundation. Y'all can welcome them as they come on. All right, thank you. And the Reverend Dr. Herman Skip Mason. All right, thank you. Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. I think you have a particular. All right, thank you all. Thanks for the help. But yeah, thanks, Mayor Jay Scott, President of Green Rock Partners. Come on up. Yeah, appreciate it. All right, Ms. Candy Tate, Dr. Candy Tate, founding president of Cultural International. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to you now. And yeah, all right, appreciate it. Thank you. And she's gonna have some questions for the panelists that she's gonna go through, and then there'll be some time for Q&A from the audience. So thank you for leading us this morning.
Thank you. Happy Black History Month. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, picked this month because of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass' birthdays. It started out as Negro History Week, and now we celebrate the month. And many of us celebrated 365.
Yeah.
I would like to start off with a tribute to a culture worker, spiritual father, community activist that I so enjoyed seeing at the Westside Future Fund Summit meetings, Mr. Akbar Imhotep. Akbar was born in Henderson, Georgia. He graduated from Payne College, 1973, was a member of the illustrious Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. He attended school and got a degree, or was working on a degree at University of Georgia, then Georgia Tech, and then found his calling in performing arts. I came to know Akbar because of the Neighborhood Arts Center, for which I wrote my dissertation on. He has worked with the Wren's Nest from 1985 to 1999. At the Neighborhood Arts Center, he was featured in Potlicker, Catalyst, Emerge, all these literary journals. He received the Yvonne Dooley Social Justice Award. He was vice president for Kuumba Storytellers. And as I said, he was very active in Vine City and English Avenue community, a member of Pleasant Hill Victory AME Church. But we also knew him as Mr. Kwanzaa. He made Atlanta's cultural art scene what we know it to be today. He leaves behind a surviving wife, Makita Johnson, who's active in the community, daughters, sons, Garvey Imhotep, Ra Malika Imhotep, grandchildren, and as I said, as a spiritual daughter of his in the cultural arts. We love and remember Mr. Akbar Imhotep.
All right.
So I thank you for indulging me in that. And today, as some of our audience has shared, you know, we've come with our boots on and our gloves up. We're culture workers ready for this fight. Are you in it with us? Amen. Amen. Reverend Dr. Mason.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My big brother. How have you instilled a love for Black history for future generations?
Well, I'm a native Atlantan, born on the west side of McClendon Hospital. Attended Morris Brown on the west side. Now I pastor on the west side, right across from Morris Brown, West Mitchell Street. In the 80s, I noticed that there were no books on Black Atlanta. You had Atlanta and Environs by Franklin Garrett. And so there was no proper representation. So I began a personal journey to begin to address that. And I published my first book, Going Against the Wind, in 1989, Cox Publishing Company. And subsequently have published 7 additional books. And so what I try to do, and may I borrow?
Oh, please.
Thank you. So what I try to do is to preserve our history. Vanishing Black Atlanta began about 9 years ago because I was bored. And I was trying to figure out Facebook. And I started posting pictures, and people started responding. And we started off with about 20, 30 people, and now we have 62,000 followers, passionate. They fight on my Facebook page about issues dealing with Atlanta. Let me move quickly because I know our time is upon us. Thank you for inviting me. John, good to be here again. Rob, good to see you. I serve on the Atlanta Beltline Partnership. Laura, my Leadership Atlanta classmate. Rodney and Darryl with Chick-fil-A. They take good care of me, and I'm not talking about feeding me. And anything Darryl sure is, I take the credit. Anything he isn't, his mom and dad getting that. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Brother Cox and Sister Annette, good to be on this panel with you. Much admiration. I bring visuals. I collect photos and have been collecting for the last 25 years. Pride myself in having one of the largest and extensive collections of images of Black Atlanta. So I want to talk just a little bit about Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy on the west side of Atlanta. Dr. King was born on Auburn Avenue, as you know. He attended David T. Howard Elementary School, but David T. Howard did not become a high school until 1948. The only high school was Booker T. Washington High School. So Dr. King would have had to travel across town, Brother Smith, to the west side to attend school. And this is the Hunter Street that Dr. King would view. You see the Ashby Theater, you see the Five and Dime. On the opposite side, you have Amos Drug Store. He would have walked, he would have taken the streetcar. Of course, this is the great Booker T. Washington High School. Shout out to all of the Booker T. Washington High School graduates. Iman, Booker T. Washington graduates, they are a cult in Atlanta. Am I right, Jocelyn?
That's right.
Okay, they are a cult. If you've never witnessed a Morris Brown College homecoming parade, when Booker T. Washington band marches down the street, there are 1,000 Booker T. Washington graduates behind them, following them to the bridge. But this is one of our great institutions in Atlanta. Dr. King would have passed by beautiful cottages and Seller Brothers Funeral Home, walking up and down Hunter Street, which is now Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, changed in 1976. This is a parade. This is the Morehouse College Band marching down Hunter Street. He would have certainly been at the soda fountain at Amos Drug Store, and he would have passed by the building that is West Hunter Street Baptist Church, and the other buildings and businesses on the avenue, florists, record shops, shoe rebuilders. Dr. King's mother attended Spelman, but had an accident, had to leave. She married Reverend King, and Spelman would not allow married women. But guess who opened their doors and allowed her to come? Morris Brown College. So Mrs. Alberta Williams King is a 1938 graduate of Morris Brown College. Of course, Dr. King, after he graduated from Booker T. Washington, he entered Morehouse in the early admissions program created by Benjamin Mays because many of the men were going off to the war. He graduated in the class of 1948, so he was on the west side. Auburn Avenue may claim him, but the west side made him. He was in the chapel. Yeah, this is a photo of him in the chapel as a student at Morehouse. So this is the west side of Atlanta. This is the Sacred Friendship Baptist Church. Don't get me started on that. Okay. Whatever. But look at community. This is how it looked on Mitchell Street. Okay. And going down Mitchell Street, you had other churches, the West Mitchell Street Church, where I pastor. There were a lot of activities, rallies there. This is the old West Mitchell Street that sat on the corner across from Morris Brown College, and of course Central United Methodist Church. So the west side was a place for spirituality. Dr. King returned back to Atlanta around 1961. He and Dr. Abernathy, and I'll bring that up, and of course moved on Sunset Avenue, as many of you all are aware. The Hunter Street of the 60s and 70s with Dr. Abernathy and King would have consisted of restaurants and taverns, and the Don Clendenin nightclub, Henderson's Travel Agency, Frazier's Cafe Society, and of course the great West Hunter Street Baptist Church, which Sister Annette will go into a little bit more detail. What a beautiful structure. I'm so thankful to God that it is still standing, and I'm thankful to God now that behind her tremendous leadership, that it soon will tell the story, long overdue story of Dr. Abernathy's role and place in the city. This is a beautiful picture of Hunter Street. You can see all the buildings. All of these buildings have been demolished. Back in the 80s, when I was a student at Morris Brown, I went up and down the street and I started taking pictures of buildings that are no longer standing. Buildings that were demolished to build the Walmart store. Of course, this is the Atlanta Inquirer, which is important in the story because it covered the civil rights movement. The Busy Bee Cafe I could afford Busy Bee when I was in college. I can't afford Busy Bee now. But the owner is my DNA cousin, true story. And so I do get a 10% family discount. Alice Barbecue was an institution, okay? And these are some of the places that Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy frequented. They met with students and other leaders of the movement. And of course, Pascal's. My heart sinks every time I drive by the building. I'm thankful the building is still standing, number one. But something has to be done to preserve it. Look at this beautiful picture of the Abernathys and the Kings and others inside of Pascal's for a meal. Pascal's also had a great nightclub, Little Carousel, which I got to go in some years ago. Great entertainers. This marvelous photo of these friends. So what I'm trying to say is that what the west side of Atlanta needs are historic markers. Yeah. There is nothing. I've been on this, I've been crying this thing for a long time. There's nothing to tell the story. Coretta Scott King taught voice at Morris Brown College. Many people don't know that. And here's a classic photo of Dr. King and Mrs. King, Dr. Abernathy, Mrs. Abernathy, and other civil rights leaders marching down Hunter Street, now ML King. And so we need to tell the story of King and Abernathys and all of the historic buildings. This is a classic photo of Dr. King's processional, coming straight through the Morris Brown College campus. And this, of course, is taken from the angle of the bridge, okay? So very quickly, Historic Market Project, West Side. If the West Side Future Fund does anything else, get behind a project to build and establish historic markers. And I've listed all of the sites, buildings, standing and not standing, that we need to put historic markers on the west side of Atlanta that would tell people the story of Atlanta. Even the vacant lots have a story. And they speak, and we need to tell that. So, I'm sorry, let me go back. So thank you so much for allowing me to share. And let's get behind a West Side Markers history.
Panel, we have architect Jay Scott. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And let me ask you a question.
Okay.
So, as an architect, what has drawn you to African American stories as American stories worthy of preservation?
Well, first of all, I'm a landscape architect by training. I'm not an building architect. But I got interested in civil rights history about 20 years ago. I started reading about it, about all these things I didn't know about, even though I was living in Atlanta. I was living in the north side. I'm actually a Yankee, Yankee by birth, Southern by the grace of God, is that what they're saying? But so I moved out here, but I started reading about all these things I didn't know about. And so I became very interested in it. And then I had the good fortune of meeting Ralph David Abernathy III when he wanted to see what he could do with the church. And at the time, we didn't know where to get any money, but fortunately, in brief time, and after Ralph had passed, then I started working with Annette, and then we had a lot of blessings of being able to find money that we've raised $2.5 million that we've spent on the church so far. And the National Park Service has become very supportive of African American properties. And Annette and I are now working on several projects around the state, as I mentioned. We're looking for more. We get money for HBCUs, we get monies for churches and other buildings where historic properties goes. If we just know the people that own them, that want to restore them. We have not had much luck connecting with the HBCUs here in Atlanta. But there is a lot of money available. So anyway, I'd just like to briefly talk about the process we've gone through. We have some pictures up here before, which when I see those pictures, I kind of forget how bad it looked. But as you know, as Dr. Mason referred to, this is some pictures from when Dr. Abernathy was installed at West Hunter by Martin Luther King Jr. On the left-hand side, the left-hand side up there, is the picture when they first arrived that Martin's father had arranged for Dr. Abernathy to interview or to meet the people at the church and take over the leadership of the church. And these are just the comparisons of what the church looked like at the top and what it looks like today down at the bottom. And you can see the work we had to do on the roof because the roof was awful, water was coming in all the time, rodents lived in there. It was a terrible place. But we got the roof done and then gradually started working around, and these are just some pictures of what the inside looked like when we first walked in there. And they don't convey what it smelled like, I assure you that. But it was a rough place. But fortunate it had been standing, and fortunately also there was surprisingly no vandalism to the building at that point. All the stained glass remained. On the west side of the building, some of the windows, because of the heat and so forth, the structure of the stained glass had started to collapse. But all the glass was there, so we were fortunate with the Park Service's help. A specialist out of Lynchburg, Virginia, took the windows out, took them apart, cleaned them, rebuilt new frames, and put them back together and installed them. And now the windows are just absolutely gorgeous. And of course, all the rotting plaster that you see there, that's all been replaced. And so there are a couple pictures in the top. You can see what it was just to compare. That's what the church is inside.
Amazing.
We are at the final stages of restoration. We're trying to get the contractor out of there. Anybody that's been involved in the construction project knows that the first 90% takes 90% of the time, then the last 10% is another 90%. And we're trying to get them to deal with the little stuff, the finishes, things that you would not accept in your home, that for some reason they want us to accept here. But we'll get them through that, and we'll get it all taken care of. And Annette will be able to tell you a little bit about what her plans are for the building, which I think are very exciting, because what's really important about this church is the congregation completely supported Dr. Abernathy in all of his work with Dr. King. And so the church was always open. Andrew Young talked about the students would always come over there and gather, in the middle of the night to talk about stuff. They couldn't gather on campus. They could in Morse Brown. But there were not a lot of places where they could, but Dr. Abernathy's congregation fully supported them in all of his efforts. And those are the kind of things that really make a lot of difference to it. Especially when you're a pastor, you need the congregation to follow you. And this is where I started with Ralph, when he said he had bought the church in 2008. And he wanted to do something to honor his parents that were. But also he wanted to build a plaza next door to honor also the people that marched with his parents. Because you all know leaders are not leaders unless they have people following them. And too often these people that followed, or these other people that did a lot of incredible work, have just been forgotten. And so we hope that this will be able to do it. I'd also like to call out, when he bought the church, the property was just to the outside of the walls. So when we were wanting to put air conditioning in the building, we didn't have anywhere to put the mechanical units outside. But Jerome and Michael Russell followed through on a promise they'd made to Ralph, and they donated that property next to the church, which is not an insignificant donation. And what that, in addition to putting the mechanical units there, that now does give us the space to have this plaza built. This is going to be a Freedom Plaza, and then I will give you more updated information about that. But then my last slide, I just would like to do, this was a photograph we had taken by some friends that had a drone. And obviously it shows Gaines Hall, which is now in worse condition than it was when we took this picture, and how close it is to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and how we think about how this country and this city are so willing to spend $1 billion on a football stadium. But yet we have Gaines Hall that was started construction 2 years after the Civil War. When you think they're building a brick schoolhouse to educate former enslaved people overlooking burned out downtown Atlanta, I can't help but smile when I think about what a lot of those people in downtown must have thought. But now we have this building that it's a whole other story in itself. This is American history here. And if you look, starting, here, people may not want to, there are 11 million people that come to Centennial Park every year to spend money. They may not want to cross over North Side Drive, the new railroad tracks. But we've made going to draw them over here to spend some of their money over here. And this corridor tells the story of freedom in America, starting in Gaines Hall, Fountain Hall, down to West Hunter, to Pascal's, to Booker T. Washington High School. It was a story like nowhere else. And it's just awful that the people in charge have not really cared about it. But we have to do that when we have to work together.
Yes. Amen.
Amen.
And if I may.
Yes.
So as you could have mourned the loss of your husband and just moved on. But as a Black woman, what compelled you to do this heritage preservation work to rebuild Black Main Street?
Well, as I said previously in a couple other settings, my husband's death could have been mourned silently, but I chose to, my daughter said, Mom, you should have shared loudly. I said, make myself busy. And that kind of helped me transition between the grief and doing something that was really, really important to my husband. So, as a mother of three, and three who bear the legacy of Dr. Abernathy, I felt it was important for me to pick up the mantle where he started. And his vision then became my mission. And that's kind of like my mantra. His vision is my mission. So in 2016, he passed. 2016, I picked up the mantle and started working with Jay, who was working with Ralph before. And understanding the history of the family and the legacy of the family and the stories that are not told, and the stories that are misrepresented, I felt it was important for my children to set this in motion. It's not so much for me, it's not so much for Ralph, it's for the future generations and making sure that our children and their children's children and children's children understand our history, particularly now that they're trying to erase our history from the schools and wherever else they can do that. So it makes it even more important to do it now than later. So for the past 7 years, this has been my task. I retired out of Turner Broadcasting in 2014, I'm sorry. And in 2016, I started the project. 7 years in, you see the product that we have produced now versus what it was when we walked in, and it was in terrible shape. Through knowing that the Park Service had federal grants available for the African American Civil Rights Grants Program, we applied. We're fortunately blessed that over the course of the last 7 years, with 7 grants being offered, we were able to secure 5, which gave us the $2.5 million that we have invested in the church thus far. Where do we go from here? I have a passion for revitalizing that corridor. I think there's so much history there, and Ralph used to say that Auburn Avenue may have been the birthplace, but West Hunter Street was the workspace. And that's where the work really happened. And there's so many things that happened in that church that couldn't happen at Ebenezer and couldn't happen on the college campuses, but it happened in that building. And those stories need to be told. When I go, my kids are, PWI graduates, my 2 boys, and when I go to those environments and I see all of the life and the activity and the spirit surrounding those institutions, but I don't see that around ours, right? So the vision is to build that there and make this a vibrant part of the Atlanta community so that 11 million people that are down across North Avenue, Northside Drive, will finally find their way over to the South Side. And in that, we'll have the entertainment, we'll have the food, we'll have the spirit, juice, that most of them come here to participate in. So I hope that this building and the restoration of this building will influence others to want to do the same. And yes, Pascal makes me sad. Every day I pass that place, and knowing all the history that is inside those walls, right? And it's not being told. And there's no blame to anyone. I just think no one has really paid attention to it, to be engaging in the opportunities to make it a better space. Too much history to have it demolished. Yeah, and if something doesn't happen soon, it might be with the gentrification that's coming through our communities. So if we don't save our history, who will?
Thank you.
If we don't invest in our history, who will?
Thank you.
So I just hope to be a beacon for that. For that reason alone, the family history, the future history, and the legacy. Earlier this week, Wednesday we had a press conference with our illustrious Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who through the community project funding grants, awarded the Ralph David Abernathy III Foundation $4 million. She also introduced the legislative bill to resurrect this into declaring it a national park.
Oh, wow.
And when it is voted upon, it will be the Ralph David Abernathy Senior National Historic Site. So I'm very, very appreciative. Both of those initiatives will be very rewarding for us in our future plans and what we want to do from the foundation perspective. Things have changed from what it was then, when it was first thought of, to where we are now, and what we're going to do with the money that we have received. It's kind of like a work in progress. But what we do know is that we want to make this church a viable part of the community, and we want to keep the doors open, even if it becomes a national park. It's 10 to 4, Monday through Friday, right? What happens after 4 o'clock in the evening? So we want to make this somewhere that the community can participate and be involved in. All of you have a stake in that community. We see it being maybe arts exhibits, musical performances, theatrical performances, weddings, receptions, whatever, to get people back in there. As Jay said, the doors were always open, and we would like to keep the doors open to the community. And make it a part of the city environment, as I said. Lots of tourism. If we can get that back over there, we can revitalize our community. That money that they're spending across the highway
Need to come this
into
way.
our community to help build back the community. So that's where I am. And there are a lot of you in this room that I heard who you are. We need to have some partnerships. You know, health and wellness, yes. You know, housing, yes. Affordable housing. Not just housing. So many of you. So if Jay and I can, maybe get some cards or get some names from the back table, that would be beneficial for some of the things that we hope and want to do. So thank you for having me.
And that's as we wrap up, this has been a fabulous panel. Know that Culture Centers International is taking her up on this offer. Do we have the last slides? But what we're planning to do, I'm pushing it. We are planning the I Am the Dream March for April 4th through the 9th. Those are the days of remembrance. There we are. And so with my team, the Hatted Historian wants to help us remember the past, to understand the present, to change the future. And as we work to rebuild Black Main Streets, whether it's Tuskegee, on Butler Island, or up in Tate, Georgia, we know that the problem still of the 21st century is the problem of the color line. So we need everyone to come together on these hallowed grounds that are around our neighborhood, such as Chattahoochee Great Descendants Project, the 1906 Atlanta Race Massacre, Brownsville in South Atlanta, and of course, our dear old Morris Brown right here. We don't want more of this, but we remember that what is connecting us to the present is our history of the past. So join us, as Martin Luther King, Reverend Martin Luther King said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, we've got to keep moving forward as a people. Save the date, April 8th, Saturday, go to our website, IamTheDreamMarch.org. Show us your interest. You saw Reverend Dr. Sid Mason's images of MLK and the march 55 years ago. We need interfaith, multi-ethnic. We are the dream that King spoke of, and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive can be the beloved community that he dreamed of. Thank you.
Thank you. We are still working on our timing, so we're right about 9 o'clock. I'm sure some people have some questions, but if people need to go, I don't want to feel like people, because we did say 9, but maybe we could go a few minutes past 9 for people that want to still ask some questions. We can keep broadcasting live and go for a few more minutes because it's such an important discussion. For those that can stay a little longer and have a question. So if you have a question, raise your hand. We're going to bring the mic to you. If you'd like to ask a question. I saw Maria support his hand up. All right, yeah.
Can you hear me? All right. I want to get everybody can see me. I'm looking behind the wall here. I'm trying to say, this is big deal stuff. I do want to say that apathy, avarice, and fear dominate so much of the conversation, hard work. When you look at some of these buildings, you look at these things, for example, you look at Gaines Hall, it is overwhelming. The idea that this can be done, that this can be achieved, is an overwhelming thing. Because the city is, if you adopt it with that kind of narrative, it makes it difficult. I will say one thing. I'm very proud to be the West Side, but I represent the city of Atlanta, Auburn Avenue, West Side, all of it. We all grow in strength in numbers. We need each other. There is not one island. It is an entire community that builds this whole thing. And I do hope to see the same investment that's happening on the West Side start to occur on Auburn Avenue. That corner of Jesse Hill, Butler Street, on Auburn Avenue, that little corridor right there is significant. It's the anchor. You get 3 to 4 million people a year at the King Center. You get 3 to 4 million people a year at Kennesaw National Battlefield. 3 to 4 million people need to come to West 100th Street. And 3 to 4 million people, 4 million people need to be visiting all this space. It's a big deal. Money makes it all happen. Without the faith in each other, without the belief in each other, this thing is not going to go anywhere. So I appreciate immensely what's happening here. It needs to multiply. It's not a singular thing. It needs to multiply. And everyone out in this room needs to go forward and give it to them. There you go.
He's a CME pastor and a fraternity brother. But I'm concerned because Clark Atlanta owns the property where Gaines Hall sits. Clark Atlanta owns pastors. Okay? Now, the week that Morris Brown College got the announcement of its reaccreditation, Clark Atlanta put huge signs up stating that this is our property. Okay? They had not been there before. I'm simply saying, okay, if you're going to own the property, do something about it and share it with the community. Gaines Hall, by my research, and you can challenge me on Facebook if you like, is the oldest standing building in the city of Atlanta. The oldest. People say, well, just tear it down and raise it. No, you can't do that.
Lord have mercy.
Gaines Hall is standing. So we need to have conversations with the other stakeholders. What is Clark Atlanta's plan for the next 5 years to develop Pasco, if they're going to do anything at all? Okay, and Gaines Hall. Integral Properties, I believe, owns some of the other parts. That's the city's arm of real estate. We don't know. And I'm a stakeholder as a pastor of Westminster Street. We have no idea what's going on right in our own backyard. So I appreciate these forums. At least it provides an opportunity, but we need to really sit down and find out what is the long-range plan for some of these dilapidated buildings.
Yeah. Most of them shares your passion and Maria's support.
The great Maria.
Thank you, dear.
You always want to be in her good grace.
Well, you actually stole my question, and that is, what can we do as a community to put pressure to bear on particularly Clark Atlanta and all the other stakeholders, as you mentioned, landowners in this area, to either shame them into it or have them see the vision and aspire to it? What can we do? I think, as in all due respect, I love your markers program. It's got to be more than the markers. It's got to be the buildings. So, what can we do?
Well,
Both and. And My production director, Trina Corbett, is passing out note cards on this.
And just the significance of what what happened here. You know, when you think so many historic sites for African Americans that are dealing with where bad things happen. Yes. You know, somebody got shot, somebody got lynched, there was a beating, a mark. These are all things where great stuff happened. This is where people came, you know, had little to nothing, far less than I have ever had in my life. And yet what they did is they banded together and they changed the world. Because the Civil Rights Movement really is the most important social movement in the world, I believe. You know, it's affected worldwide. And so yet here we are, where so much of it started, or where the thought parts of it were, where the thinking, the planning. We are here, and we're going to have the World Cup in here. Millions of people coming here, and they're going to want to see. What are they going to see? I hate when you take these tours where you say, well, that empty building, that's where this happened. See that falling down structure, that vacant lot, this is where this happened. Right. You know, we need to have real things, because one thing, people walk into our church. No, I say our church, it's really her church.
It's our church.
Sorry. But they walk in and their eyes just open up. And yesterday, Pastor Jay from West Hunter, I took him up into Dr. Abernathy's office, which is about the size of one of these panels here. It's really tiny.
Yeah.
He could not believe it, because compared to what, you know, churches and pastors have now, it's just a different world. But there's nothing like living and breathing in these historic buildings to understand what happened. And that's the only time I think people will ever get to believe in what happened.
And Jay, we'll get to you in just a second. As we think about this, it is both and. I started this preservation project with $500,000 stained glass grant for Wheat Street Baptist Church. I was on Auburn Avenue. Yes, we have to do that work. I'm a graduate of Clark Atlanta and have gone through 3 presidents, and they have ignored me. And so because of that, I said, well, let me help Morris Brown out. I'm now $2 million into helping restore Fountain Hall.
Awesome.
But the Fountain Hall project, thank you, is a $30 million project. So, you know, so that's one building. This is, we've got to all work together to understand that our cultural resources are invaluable, not tear them down. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Fountain Hall was originally Stone Hall. It was an experiment of white missionaries coming from Yale to educate us post-emancipation. They had their children being educated next to our children in a segregated South. Look at this panel. Look at the audience. We are the New South, Atlanta. We can do this together. So, all my brothers and sisters, we implore you to come out April 8th, be part of the march, tell the world that Atlanta's Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, the place where Ralph David Abernathy and King and so many others changed the world, right there on that street. John.
All right, well, I think it's hard to stop that. Pastor Cabaneda, if people still want to hang around, we can ask some more questions. I see Tracy, you got a real look.
Merlin had a question. Did you have a question?
Yeah, all right, we'll do one more, absolutely. Bring the mic up.
Appropriate to end with an artist.
Thank you. I have not really shared with a lot of people, but my mother was the research librarian, which is equivalent to the archivist at the King Center. She started in 1969, the year after Dr. King was assassinated. And so I've been in a number, from an infant, in a number of meetings that talk about meetings, talk about getting together, talk about, I used to say to my mother, we meet for the sake of meeting, we're gonna do something. And so one of the things that I've learned and done in my, I have an MBA from Atlanta University, and corporate experience in marketing, so I'm a strategist. And so we can talk about, we need to do this. The thing we need to do is set a date. Right. And say we're going to get together on this date so that the community can then come together whether they want to or not. And so those that say that yes, they want to come together, then have that. And so using your date of April 4th through the 9th to say, okay, on the 9th, I'm making this up because I do that with strategy. On the night of April 8th, your parade, okay, we're going to have a conversation for all the entities to come together on this night so that we can have a conversation and set a map, set a plan, invite Clark Atlanta, invite the Russells, invite the people on that day, or whatever day, but invite them on that day, and then to say, okay, from this now collected, we're gonna meet with the Auburn Avenue on this day. And so we're gonna come together, set a date, and then see how to make it happen so that we can do it, as Dr. King said in that thing, move forward, move in that direction, because y'all, I'm sick of having meetings for the sake of meetings. And so we don't need to, it's rhetoric at that point. We're just talking to each other. We're not moving forward and making things happen. And so that's my request, that we set a date and make it happen, and then see what happens after that. If it doesn't happen, then that's another thing. Where's that picture from?
This is the new artwork that's on the at the entrance of Martin Luther King.
North side, okay.
This is at night. It lights up.
Oh.
Yes. And the mural is on the side of a business on Joseph Lowry. This mural is what inspired me to, and Culture Centers International, to have the event. To your request, on the if you go to the website, you'll see our days of events. This is Passion Week. Easter Sunday is the 9th. That's why we're moving the march to the Saturday. But on the Tuesday, we'll be at the church with Reverend Dr. Mason interviewing, were you there? Were you there 55 years ago? And then on the Thursday, we will have a series, a virtual conference around where do we go from here.
So that Thursday is what day? So can we
Thursday is
I'm just asking for action, because I'm over talking.
Thursday is the 6th, Good Friday. So all the area churches, if you have services, please let us know. We'll publicize it on the website.
And if you don't have a church, we invite you to the West Christian Methodist, and come on Easter Sunday. You won't be embarrassed.
We will call you out.
We're going to do one more question to see, because she looks like she's really wants to ask a question. We'll do this last question. We'll thank you.
Hi, Lee Stringfield. I'm head of ecosystem development for the Center for Global Health Innovation. We are repurposing the AT&T building to make it the state-of-the-art go-to place for life sciences, destination for biotech, medtech, AI, ML, and all of the new nanotechnology sciences. We want to offer our community health workers, as well as our community navigators, to assist you with any of your programs, outreach, events. Use me as a sounding board, anything. I just moved here from Boston, and the realtor was showing me communities like Virginia Highlands, Ansted Park. But I said I wanted to move to where I can have impact and make a difference. And so I purchased a house, 30318 zip code. 30318 zip code. Well, anyway, it's people like me moving from Boston, San Francisco, New York here, and unfortunately gentrification is happening, but use us and challenge us to improve where we're moving. So I'm very active in the community. I have great neighbors. I don't care what people say about the community. I love where I'm at. I love what I'm doing, but I also want to support you in any way possible.
Awesome.
We thank you, and we're actually, I'm in the 30318 neighborhood, right next to Frederick Douglass High School, and this is our community. The march is not just a march. It is a historic march following the funeral procession, but we will land in front of Harkness Hall on Clark Atlanta University's campus and have a Dream STEAM festival for youth, adults, careers. Any of you nonprofits that want a table, vendor, please go to the website and sign up and see us. So again, it's not marching for marching, but we want to prepare our kids for the future.
Awesome.
All right, well, awesome discussion. Clearly, you put a lot of passion.